I think ultimately the excitement around VR and augmented reality was real, but I think people have started to try to expand beyond that. And so obviously it's a good way to differentiate for content creators and people trying to get into the streaming space. But ultimately, traditional content is still the bulk of what's being created. And so we've really tried to lean into more of the traditional content plus immersive content, and that's created some really interesting opportunities for differentiation. And particularly with the rise of 5G, there's a lot of talk of XR, VR, AR, and how that can fit into a 5G streaming context. So getting some new life there as well.
Tony, when we talk about VR and AR and everything, I just recently read a great book on Oculus and the sale to Facebook and how it had so much promise. The name of that book was The Future of Everything. But basically, so many people in the industry expected, okay, now we're at the inflection point. It's taken so long for VR to really hit and go mainstream, but now with Oculus, it's going to be so big, it's going to go mainstream, and that still hasn't quite been the case, right? I mean, I know that, we've got various headsets, we've got some games that are popular in that community, but I still feel like, and tell me if this is fair, VR isn't quite here yet. When will we get there, and what's the status right now of the industry?
That's 100% right, and I think ultimately, we see the opportunity in VR now as like an interesting opportunity to kind of sweeten things, but not the core of where content creation is happening. There's a lot of new content companies that are coming up, like Whistle and Newform, who we recently did deals with, and Law and Crime as well, where we have a live stream 24 hours a day, Law and Crime. It's Harvey Weinstein case is on right now. And so it's things like that at that level, live streaming 24 hours a day. But we also put them in a virtual courtroom. So if you don't have a VR headset, you can just watch that content just on our PlayStation application on 105 million devices. But if you have a VR headset, you can go into a virtual courtroom and watch the trial like in a surrounded environment. So it creates interesting opportunities for immersion, but it's not limiting by the industry taking its time a bit.
The NBA years ago, when they were first starting to experiment with VR, they brought me into a room and they showed me their prototype, and it put me front and center court, courtside, watching a game, and I thought, kind of cool, but also kind of sucks, because it's not the fan experience of actually being there, and I'm actually far from the action, because I'm courtside, which means that all the action is happening over there and there. And so I thought, maybe sports is not actually the answer for VR. I'm wondering what category of entertainment you see as the most promising. Is it sports? Is it video games? Is it some version of movies that are immersive? What's going to hit?
Yeah, video games are still probably the biggest opportunity. We have actually seen a lot of engagement around people just going into VR and having a personal movie theater. So they're just watching a movie in a VR headset, which we didn't think would be such a big thing, but it actually turns out that it is. Maybe you have terrible roommates, or you want to escape your spouse, or whatever it is. But it has shown to be really interesting to people. And through that streaming of traditional content into a VR context, that's where we found the opportunity to start to broaden that out a little bit. So if humans are lazy, so they don't necessarily want to work for their content all the time, and you want to just watch it on TV. And so we created the opportunity to stream content to TVs, but also if you don't have, or if you do have a VR headset and you don't want to watch it on TV, you want to be more immersed, then you have the opportunity to do it in VR. So I think the VR industry needs to recognize that the consumer behavior around putting a headset on we're still a ways away from that, and consumers like to sit on the couch and watch TV with their phone on or their laptop open next to them.
Or in this case of gaming, they like to go to a play. Like my kids love to go to the local VR salon or arcade or whatever you call it.
Oh, the VR salon, yes. You can get a great haircut and go into the VR.
Yeah.
It's not that
get blown out. Get a blowout in a different way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It does sound interesting, especially, man, watching the Weinstein cases if you're in the courtroom. I'm going to have to look into that. Tony Mugavero, Littlstar CEO, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.